Grandma, I need to tell you something. Her voice dropped. It's about Mom. My chest tightened. Of course it was. My granddaughter showed up at my house on New Year's Eve, pale, tired, barely holding herself together. I hadn't seen her in 8 months. Her mother had made sure of that. At least that's what I thought. I let her in. By midnight, I started to question everything I thought I knew. My name is Willa. I'm 72 years old. I live alone in a house that used to be full. My husband Earl built this place with his own hands back in 1979. We raised our son Marcus here. Watched him take his first steps in the living room, graduate high school, marry a woman named Rachel in our backyard under the oak tree Earl planted the year Marcus was born. Earl passed away 12 years ago. Heart attack. Quick. No warning. One morning he was drinking coffee at this very table, and by noon he was gone. I've been alone ever since, but I had my son. I had my granddaughter, Jade. I had Sunday dinners and birthday parties, and the comfort of knowing that even if Earl was gone, I still had family. At least I thought I did. Marcus is 50 now. He and Rachel have been married 24 years. Jade is their only child. 21 years old, sharp as a tack, with her father's eyes and her grandmother's stubbornness. For most of those 24 years, we were close. Not perfect, but close. Rachel and I had our differences. She's a private woman, careful with her words, not the warm and open type. But I respected her. She made my son happy. She raised my granddaughter well. That was enough. Then, about 3 years ago, everything changed. It didn't happen all at once. It crept in slowly, like mold behind wallpaper. You don't notice it until the whole wall is rotted through. It started with Marcus. He stopped calling on Sundays. At first, I didn't think much of it. People get busy. Lives get full. I told myself it was nothing. But then the visits got shorter. Then they stopped altogether. I'd invite them for dinner. Rachel would say Marcus had a work thing. I'd offer to drive to them. Rachel would say it wasn't a good time. I'd ask to speak to Marcus directly. Rachel would say he was resting, or out, or unavailable. Always Rachel. Always the gatekeeper. I started paying attention to the little things. The way Rachel's voice tightened when I called. The way she'd end conversations quickly, like she was trying to get me off the phone. The way she'd position herself between me and Marcus at the rare family gatherings, always whispering something to him that made his shoulders tense. I'm not a paranoid woman, but I know when something's wrong, and something was very, very wrong. The last real conversation I had with Marcus was almost 2 years ago. I'd driven to their house unannounced. I know Rachel hated when I did that, but I was worried. Marcus hadn't returned my calls in 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence from a son who used to call me every Sunday without fail. When I pulled into the driveway, Rachel's car was there. Marcus's truck was there. But when I knocked, no one answered. I waited, knocked again, called Marcus's phone from the porch. I could hear it ringing inside the house. No one came. I was about to leave when the door finally opened. It was Rachel. She looked exhausted, hair unwashed, no makeup, dark circles I'd never seen before. Willa, this isn't a good time. I've been calling for weeks. Is Marcus here? She hesitated. I saw something flash across her face. Fear? Guilt? I couldn't tell. He's resting. He hasn't been feeling well. Then let me see him. I'm his mother. He needs rest, Willa. I'll have him call you. She started to close the door. I put my hand on it. Rachel, what's going on? Why are you keeping me from my son? Her jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought she might finally tell me the truth. Instead, she said, I'm not keeping you from anyone. I'm asking you to respect our space. Then she closed the door in my face. I stood on that porch for a long time, long enough to see the curtain in the upstairs window move, long enough to know someone was watching me leave. After that day, I stopped calling, not because I didn't care, because every call felt like begging. Every voicemail felt like shouting into a void. I was tired of reaching out and hitting a wall. I told myself, if Marcus wants to talk to me, he knows where I live. He didn't come. Weeks turned into months. Holidays came and went. I spent Thanksgiving alone, Christmas alone, my birthday alone. I started telling people what happened, my friends at church, my book club, my neighbor Dorothy, who always brought pie when she sensed something was wrong. They all said the same thing. It's Rachel. She's controlling. She's isolated him. You see it all the time with these possessive wives. And I believed them. Because the alternative, that my son simply didn't want me anymore, was too painful to consider. Then about a year ago, Jade started reaching out. It began with a text, simple, unexpected. Hi, Grandma. I miss you. My heart nearly stopped. I hadn't heard from Jade in months. Rachel had made it clear that contact wasn't welcome. But here was my granddaughter, reaching out on her own. I texted back immediately. I miss you too, sweetheart. So much. We started talking after that. Not often, just occasional texts. Short calls when Rachel wasn't around. Jade was careful. She said her mother didn't know she was reaching out, and she wanted to keep it that way. I asked her once, why doesn't your mother want you talking to me? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mom told me not to talk to you about what's going on at home. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? What's going on at home? Another pause. Dad's not doing well, Grandma. He's different, and Mom and Dad fight a lot. I felt my chest tighten. Fight about what? I don't know. Everything. Nothing. Mom's always stressed. Dad barely talks. I don't know what to do. She sounded so lost, so overwhelmed. My 21-year-old granddaughter carrying something too heavy for her shoulders. I'm here for you, I told her. Whatever you need, I'm here. We hung up, and I sat in the dark for a long time, putting the pieces together. Rachel was stressed. Of course she was. She was running that household like a dictator. Marcus barely talked. Of course he didn't. Rachel had probably beaten him down until he had nothing left to say. They fought constantly. Of course they did. Rachel was impossible to live with. And Jade, poor Jade, trapped in that house with a controlling mother who wouldn't even let her talk to her own grandmother. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the anger harden inside me like cement. Over the next several months, Jade and I talked whenever we could. She'd call me from her car or text me late at night when her parents were asleep. I treasured every moment. She was my only connection to that family, the only proof I hadn't been completely erased. She told me things, small things that painted a bigger picture. Dad stays in his room a lot. Sometimes he doesn't come out for days. Mom looks tired all the time. I think she's barely holding it together. I heard them arguing last night. Mom was crying. Dad just sat there. I listened to every word, and every word confirmed what I already believed. Rachel was suffocating my son. Her controlling nature had finally broken him. He was withdrawing because that's what happens when you live with someone who has to manage everything, control everything, decide everything. I never asked Jade what the arguments were about. I never asked why Marcus was staying in his room. I never asked why Rachel was crying. I thought I already knew the answers. I didn't need to ask questions when the story was already so clear. I started keeping a list, not on paper, just in my head. Every piece of evidence that proved Rachel was the problem. The door closed in my face, the unanswered calls, the canceled holidays, the way she'd whisper to Marcus, the way she kept Jade quiet, the fighting, the tension, the way my son had disappeared inside his own life. All of it pointed to one conclusion. Rachel had stolen my family. I told my friends. They agreed. I told my pastor. He said some people just can't help being controlling. I told Dorothy. She shook her head and said, "That poor man, that poor girl, living under that woman's thumb." Everyone confirmed what I already knew. Nobody questioned the story. Why would they? I'd told it so well. 6 months ago, Jade stopped reaching out. The text slowed. The calls stopped. I tried reaching out to her, but she didn't respond. I assumed Rachel had found out. I assumed she'd been punished. I assumed I'd lost my last connection to that family. I spent those months in a fog, going through the motions, making coffee I didn't drink, attending church but not hearing the sermons, sitting in my living room and staring at photos of a family that no longer wanted me. I'd never felt so alone. Then on New Year's Eve, Jade showed up at my door. I made her tea. She held the cup but didn't drink. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I used to help her with homework, where she'd eat cookies and tell me about school, where everything used to be simple. She looked older now, harder, like she'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. "Grandma," she said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." I nodded. My hands were shaking. She took a breath. "Dad's been sick, not physically, mentally. He's been depressed for almost 3 years, really depressed, the kind where you can't get out of bed, the kind where you stop caring about anything, the kind where—" She stopped, swallowed. "The kind where we were scared we'd lose him." I felt the room tilt. "What? Mom didn't want me to tell you? Dad didn't want you to know. He made Mom promise not to say anything. He said—" Her voice cracked. "He said he didn't want you to see him like that. He didn't want you to know your son was broken." I couldn't breathe. "Jade, I don't understand." "I know you don't. That's why I'm here." She told me everything. 3 years ago, right around the time the silence started, Marcus had a breakdown. Not a dramatic one, a quiet one. The kind that creeps in and hollows you out from the inside. It started with insomnia, then withdrawal, then days where he couldn't get out of bed, then weeks where he barely spoke. He stopped going to work, stopped eating regularly, stopped being the man he used to be. Rachel tried to hold everything together. She picked up extra shifts at her job. She handled all the bills. She made excuses to everyone, including me, because Marcus begged her not to tell anyone. He was ashamed, Jade said. He didn't want anyone to know, especially not you. Why, especially not me? Jade looked at me with those eyes, Her father's eyes. Because of Grandpa. I felt the blood drain from my face. What about Grandpa? Dad was the one who found him, Grandma, the morning he died. Dad came by to borrow a tool or something, and he found Grandpa on the kitchen floor. He called 911. He tried CPR. He stayed with the body until the ambulance came. I knew this. I'd always known this, but I'd never thought about what it meant. He never talked about it, Jade continued, not to Mom, not to anyone. He just pushed through. For 12 years he pushed through, and then 3 years ago something cracked. Mom thinks it is the anniversary of Grandpa's death. Something triggered it, and everything he'd buried just came flooding up. I sat there, frozen, remembering Marcus at Earl's funeral, dry-eyed, steady, holding my hand while I wept. Marcus in the weeks after, handling the estate, managing the paperwork, being strong. I'd been so grateful for his strength. I never once asked what it cost him. Mom begged him to get help, Jade said, for years. She begged him to see a therapist, to talk to a doctor, to tell you what was happening. He refused. He said he just needed time. He said he'd be fine. He said, she stopped. He said what? He said you'd been through enough. Losing Grandpa almost broke you. He couldn't bear the thought of you watching him fall apart, too. He wanted to protect you. I thought about all those unanswered calls, all those closed doors, all those times I accused Rachel of keeping me away. So Rachel, Mom was trying to hold everything together, Grandma. She was working 2 jobs, managing Dad's meds, making sure he ate, making sure he didn't hurt himself. She was exhausted. She was terrified. And she was doing it all alone because Dad wouldn't let her tell anyone. The fights, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. You told me they fight a lot. Jade nodded. They do, but not because Mom's controlling, because she kept trying to save him, and he kept pushing her away. She wanted him to get help. He refused. She wanted to tell you. He refused. She wanted to take him to the hospital when it got really bad. He refused. She looked at me. Mom was fighting for him, Grandma, every single day. And he was fighting against her because he was too ashamed to let anyone see what he'd become. I thought about Rachel at the door that day, the dark circles, the unwashed hair, the exhaustion in her eyes. I thought I was seeing a controlling woman guarding her territory. I was seeing a woman drowning. Why didn't she tell me? I asked. Even if Marcus didn't want her to, why didn't she just tell me? Jade was quiet for a moment. Because she promised him, and because she knew how much you loved him. She knew that if you found out, you'd come running. You'd try to fix it. And Dad wasn't ready to be seen. He was barely surviving. Mom thought. She thought if she could just hold things together long enough for him to get better, she could fix it herself. She didn't want to break your heart while he was still broken. I felt tears sliding down my face. She let me hate her. She knew you did. She told me once, and she said, your grandmother probably thinks I'm a monster, and that's okay. Better she hates me than watches her son fall apart. I sat with that for a long time. All those years of anger, all those nights lying awake, cursing Rachel's name, all those conversations with friends where I painted her as the villain. She knew. She knew I hated her, and she accepted it, because the alternative was letting me see my son at his worst, letting me carry that weight, letting me grieve him while he was still alive. She sacrificed our relationship to protect me, and I had no idea. Is he okay now? I asked. Marcus, is he? He's getting help, finally. It took a while, but about 6 months ago he agreed to see a therapist. He's on medication. He's not all the way back, but he's better. He's talking again. He's coming out of his room. Last week he made breakfast for the first time in 2 years. She smiled a little, a fragile, hopeful smile. He's not the dad I remember. Not yet. But he's trying. Why are you telling me now? I asked. After all this time, why now? Jade set down her tea, looked me in the eyes. Because last week, Dad asked about you. My heart stopped. He said he missed you. He said he was ashamed of how long it had been. He said he didn't know how to face you after everything, but he wanted to try. She reached across the table and took my hand. I came here because I couldn't let you keep hating Mom for something she didn't do, and because Dad needs you, even if he doesn't know how to say it. 3 years. Rachel let herself be hated. 3 years. She watched her mother-in-law turn her into a monster. She could have told the truth. She could have defended herself. She didn't, because her husband begged her not to, because she loved him that much, because she'd rather be hated than let Willa watch her son fall apart. That's not a villain. That's a hero who never got credit. Hit subscribe. If you believe people like Rachel exist in real life, carrying everything, blamed for everything, silent because no one would believe them anyway. Only people who assume the worst, who spread rumors and never ask questions, would ignore this. Comment, I see her. If you've ever been painted as the villain by people who didn't know the full story too, don't side with the gossips. Don't side with the assumptions. This one's for the women who held it together when no one noticed. The next morning, I drove to their house. I didn't call ahead. I didn't know what I was going to say. I just knew I couldn't wait another day. Rachel answered the door. She looked better than the last time I'd seen her. Still tired, but lighter somehow. When she saw me, her face went through a dozen emotions I couldn't name. Willa. I know, I said. Jade told me everything. I know. She stood there for a moment. Then her face crumpled. Not dramatically, just a slow collapse, like a wall finally giving way. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I wanted to tell you so many times, but he made me promise, and I didn't know how to. I stepped forward and pulled her into my arms. She stiffened for a second. Then she broke, sobbed into my shoulder like a woman who'd been holding her breath for 3 years. I'm the one who's sorry, I said, for everything I thought about you, for every awful thing I said. I didn't know. I didn't understand. How could you? She said through tears. I made sure you wouldn't. Marcus came downstairs while we were still standing in the doorway. I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight. His hair was grayer. His eyes had a haunted quality I'd never seen before. But when he saw me, something shifted. A flicker of the boy I raised. The man I thought I'd lost. Mom? I walked toward him slowly, gave him time to pull away if he needed to. He didn't pull away. He fell into my arms and held on like he was drowning. I'm sorry, he kept saying. I'm so sorry. Shh, I whispered, stroking his hair like I used to when he was small. You don't have to apologize. You never have to apologize. We sat in their living room for hours, talking, crying, sitting in silence when words weren't enough. Marcus told me about the depression, about finding Earl, about the 12 years of pretending he was fine when he was dying inside, about the shame that kept him from reaching out. "I didn't want you to see me like that," he said. "You already lost Dad. I couldn't make you watch me disappear too." "You're my son," I said. "I would rather sit with you in the darkness than stand in the light without you." He cried when I said that. Rachel reached over and took his hand. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. This woman I'd blamed for everything. This woman I'd called controlling, cold, impossible. She wasn't the villain. She was the hero. She'd held my family together with her bare hands while I stood on the outside throwing stones. Before I left, I asked Rachel to walk me to my car. We stood in the driveway, the evening air cool and quiet. "I owe you an apology," I said. "A real one. Not just for today. For years of thinking the worst of you. For telling people terrible things about you. For blaming you when you were the one keeping everything from falling apart." Rachel shook her head. "You didn't know. Because you protected me. You let me hate you so I wouldn't have to hurt." She was quiet for a moment. "Marcus loves you more than anyone," she finally said. "The thought of disappointing you was worse than the depression itself. I couldn't let him lose you on top of everything else, even if it meant losing you myself." I took her hands in mine. "You didn't lose me? I lost my way. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." She squeezed my hands. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet, but it was a start. On the drive home, I pulled over at the cemetery. It was dark, but I knew the path by heart. I'd walked it 100 times since Earl died. I stood at his grave and looked down at the stone. "I didn't know," I said out loud. "I didn't know what he went through, what finding you did to him. I didn't know." The wind rustled the trees. No answer. There never was. "I spent years blaming the wrong person. Years being angry at a woman who was holding our family together. Years I'll never get back." I wiped my eyes. "But I know now, and I'm going to make it right. I promise." The next few months were slow. Marcus continued therapy. Some weeks were better than others. There were setbacks, days when he couldn't get out of bed, days when the shame threatened to swallow him whole. But he kept trying. That's what mattered. Rachel and I started over. We had coffee every Saturday morning. Awkward at first, too polite, too careful. But slowly, the walls came down. She told me about the hardest nights, the times she thought she couldn't keep going, the times she almost called me and then didn't. "I wrote you letters," she admitted once, "dozens of them, explaining everything. I never sent them." "Why not?" "Because Marcus asked me not to, and because I thought if you knew how bad it was, you'd never forgive yourself for not being there." She was protecting me, even then. Jade came to visit more often now. She'd sit in my kitchen like she used to, drinking tea and telling me about her life. One afternoon, she said something that stopped me cold. "I used to be so angry at Mom. I thought she was making everything worse. I thought if she'd just back off, Dad would get better. And now I realize she was the only thing standing between him and the bottom. She held us all together, Grandma, even when we couldn't see it. Even when we blamed her for everything." I thought about all the times I'd listened to Jade and interpreted her words through my own anger. All the time she told me the truth and I twisted it into evidence against Rachel. "You tried to tell me," I said. "You told me your mom was exhausted, that they were fighting, that your dad wasn't doing well. I just didn't hear it right." Jade nodded. "I wasn't trying to take sides. I was just scared, and you were the only person outside that house I could talk to. I'm sorry I made it about my anger instead of your pain." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're here now. That's what matters. Last Sunday, we had dinner together, all of us, for the first time in 3 years. I brought my peach cobbler, Earl's recipe. Rachel made roast chicken. Jade set the table with the good china. Marcus was quiet, but present. He ate. He laughed at one of Jade's jokes. He helped clear the dishes without being asked. At one point, I caught him and Rachel in the kitchen. He had his arms around her waist. She was leaning into him. They weren't talking, just standing there holding each other. I thought about all the times I'd seen them together and interpreted it as tension, control, something sinister. I was seeing two people who'd been through hell and somehow found their way back to each other. After dinner, I sat on their porch with Rachel. The sun was setting. The air smelled like jasmine and fresh-cut grass. "I spent 3 years hating you," I said. 3 years telling anyone who'd listen that you stole my son from me. Rachel didn't say anything, just listened. "And now I have to live with the fact that while I was building my case against you, you were saving my family. You were carrying weight I didn't even know existed, and you did it alone because my son asked you to, because you loved him that much." I turned to look at her. How do I make that right? How do I apologize for years of being so wrong? She was quiet for a long moment. "You don't have to make it right, Willa. You just have to stay." "I'm not going anywhere." "Then that's enough." I sat with that for a long time after I got home. I thought about all the stories we tell ourselves, the villains we create because it's easier than facing the truth, the assumptions we make when we don't have all the facts. For 3 years, I believed Rachel was the enemy. I was wrong. She wasn't the woman who stole my son. She was the woman who kept him alive when he wanted to disappear. She wasn't the wall between us. She was the bridge, holding everything together until we were ready to cross back to each other. I had built an entire war out of half-truths and hurt feelings. I had turned a hero into a villain because it was easier than asking the hard questions. And the hardest part? Every piece of information I used to condemn her was true. Jade never lied. Rachel never lied. The only lie was the story I told myself. Last night I called Dorothy, the neighbor who'd spent years agreeing with me about Rachel, the one who'd shaken her head and said, "That poor man, living under that woman's thumb." I was wrong, I told her, about everything. Rachel wasn't the problem. She was the only thing holding them together. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. "How do you know?" "Because I finally stopped telling my story long enough to hear theirs." She didn't say much after that. I don't think she knew how. Maybe she was thinking about her own assumptions, her own stories. I hope she was. I'm 72 years old. I've lived long enough to know that the truth is rarely simple. People aren't villains or heroes. They're just people, doing the best they can with what they have, making choices that look wrong from the outside but make sense from where they're standing. Rachel made a choice to protect my son's pride in my heart, even if it meant losing me. That choice cost her years of my respect, my trust, my love. I don't know if I would have been strong enough to make that same choice. I don't know if I would have let myself be hated to protect someone else, but I know I'm grateful someone did. If you've stayed with me this long, I want you to hear something. We all have Rachels in our lives. People we've blamed without knowing the full story. People we've turned into villains because it was easier than sitting with uncertainty. And we all have moments where we're so sure we're right that we stop asking questions. We stop listening. We build our cases out of half-truths and hurt feelings and call it justice. But the truth doesn't care about our feelings. It just waits, quietly, patiently, until we're ready to hear it. If there's someone in your life you've been angry at, someone you've blamed for things you don't fully understand, I'm asking you to do something hard. Ask questions instead of making assumptions. Listen instead of building cases. Consider the possibility that you might be wrong, because the person you've been fighting might not be your enemy at all. They might be the one who's been holding everything together while you stood on the outside, convinced you knew the whole story. And if this story found you at the right moment, if it made you think about your own assumptions, your own silences, your own walls, then share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment if something here rang true, because none of us are as alone as we think we are, and it's never too late to see clearly. This is Grandma Willa. Thank you for listening.